It is 9:04 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time. It is the third day of April 2025. This is episode 1068 of Bitcoin, and it's going to be a different one. We're going to talk about biology in this one, so buckle up, because this is not only going to be about just simple biology. There's going to be how it connects to Bitcoin in a particular way, but it's also going to be how I constructed this entire episode and the article that I'm going to be talking about in it using artificial intelligence, but using it in a different way, or at least I think I'm using it in a different way. Because most people are like, oh, AI is going to kill us all, or it's going to steal all of our jobs, or it's going to become evil and walk across the planet using other humans to club humans like baby seals. No, that's not going to happen. Somebody will create systems that are evil with it. Yes, that's true. But like biology and like Bitcoin, it's just a tool, man. I mean, biowarfare. Does that mean that we should be afraid of all biology? No. Just because fiat currency is just the most horrid structure on earth doesn't mean that we don't trust all money, especially something like Bitcoin, or for the Peter Schiffs of the world, gold. No, of course not. Just because somebody bastardized a system or an idea does not mean that the tool that they are using is bad. I'm pretty sure that in the history of mankind, somebody has been killed with a hammer. Do we stop building houses? No, we don't. So I want to go through and frame this conversation before we get into it. I had this idea a long time ago, and I've been ruminating on it for a while, and this is the biological part, right? I keep thinking about it, and it combines the use of biochar, the brewing of compost tea, foliar inoculation, as well as how do you get this stuff into the soil. There's a lot of people I know that they just throw biochar on the soil. And does it wash away? I mean, if it's on the surface of the soil, how does it actually penetrate into the soil? Because if the biochar, or we could also call it agricultural charcoal at this point, because it's not charged with biology, but either way, how does it get inside the soil? Do I have to depend on worms coming up through the soil going, oh, hey, it's crystallized carbon, and they kind of like that stuff, but are they going to be able to pull enough of it down before rains come and it washes away? You know, these are the things that I kind of think about going, well, biochar is great, and we'll get into that later, and compost tea is great, and we'll get into some of that later, but how do I keep it or how do I put it where I want it? How do I keep it there? And thusly, I started thinking, you know what? I think I've got a couple of really good ideas here, and I am going to use these ideas, and I'm going to try to coalesce them into something like an article or a podcast episode, and or both, which it's going to become. But I want to use a different tool. This time I don't want to sit down and write out an outline and do the thing and then write script. And I normally don't do that for the shows anyway for Bitcoin, and I usually do the Bitcoin news. And there's a whole bunch of crappy ass news going on today, which is why I'm not going to talk about any of it. I'm not going to talk about tariffs. I'm not going to talk about a $7,000 price drop from a high that only lasted for 30 minutes, and everybody's freaking out and they're jumping up and down. So no, we're going to do something entirely different. But it's going to include Bitcoin. So just bear with me. I'm going to read you the bare bones structure of the article that I have already posted both on my website, which is Bitcoin and Show. That's bitcoinandshow.com. Bitcoin and Show, all one word. It's a brand new website. It hasn't been live very long. It clearly is going to need some work. But this is one of the first things that I posted to it. It's called Brewing Biology, a novel system for biochar, compost tea, and microbial inoculation in plants and soils. What if we could help plants not just from the ground up, but also from the top down. That question led to the development of a novel concept in sustainable biology, a hybrid system that applies compost tea and biochar both as a foliar spray and as a subsoil slurry injection. The goal? To colonize entire plants with beneficial microbes, boost nutrient cycling, increase disease resistance, increase water retention in soils, and create a pathway for carbon credit generation through carbon sequestration. So the foliar spray system, glomalin as glue and biochar as a vehicle. Traditionally, arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi, AMF, are known for root zone symbiosis. They help plants access nutrients like phosphorus. They secrete glomalin, which is a glue-like glycoprotein, and improve drought tolerance. This article proposes an aerial twist, using AMF-rich compost tea mixed with fine particle biochar as a foliar spray. The glomalin could help endophytic inoculated biochar particles adhere to leaf surfaces, increasing the likelihood of microbial colonization of treated plant structures like leaves. While AMF typically colonizes roots, some fungal and bacterial endophytes, which live inside of plants, naturally inhabit leaf, stem, and even floral tissues. Trichoderma and Beauvaria, for instance, are fungal endophytes known to colonize above-ground parts of plants, offering pathogen resistance and pest deterrence. On the bacterial side, species like Bacillus subtilis, Pseudomonas fluorescens, and Azospirillum brasiliensis supports nutrient uptake and plant immune response. By brewing a fungal-dominated tea first, and then adding these bacterial endophytes later, this approach ensures optimal growth conditions for each group. Trichoderma thrives in aerated brews. Beauvaria, Bacina, may be added late in the process to prevent oxygen stress. While Epochulae species are harder to propagate outside host seeds, the use of other resilient endophytes more than compensates. Bacterial players such as Bacillus subtilis and Pseudomonas fluorescens also integrate well when added after the fungal population is established. Automation plays a key role here, with temperature, pH, and oxygenation controlled via digital sensors and timed dosing pumps. The foliar system could be precisely calibrated for microbial compatibility and stability. Each group occupies its niche: biofilms, leaf interiors, root hairs, or biochar pores, without aggressive competition, creating a layered inoculation strategy for full-spectrum plant and soil health. The keyline plow system. This is how we inject life into the soil. For deeper soil integration, the system incorporates a keyline plow with a modified slurry injection apparatus. Originally designed to improve water infiltration and root depth, the keyline plow forms ideal channels 30 to 45 centimeters deep. When combined with slurry injection, these furrows become delivery routes for microbial-rich compost tea and biochar. The unique geometry of the keyline shank, or the tip of the keyline shank, resembles an inverted boat hull, and it creates lateral fractures in the soil. This could help spread the slurry horizontally as well as vertically downwards, encouraging microbial colonization beyond the injection point. This functions somewhat like an inverted version of hydraulic fracturing, also known as fracking, used in petroleum extraction, though in a regenerative and environmentally beneficial context. The biochar serves as a microbial habitat, gradually releasing the inoculant and improving long-term soil structure and fertility. The VOGT injector system is a point-based subsoil delivery system, unlike the keyline plow system. In addition to the keyline method, the VOT GeoInjector Pro system offers a precise point injection solution designed for golf courses, tree care, and compacted soil environments. This device aerates the soil while injecting microbial solutions and amendments at controlled depths, typically 30 to 50 centimeters. It operates through repeated static injections at set intervals, which is anywhere between 50 centimeters to 1 meter apart, making it especially useful in areas where continuous furrow injection is not practical. While slower than the keyline approach, it allows for pinpoint delivery of compost tea and biochar slurry in tight, high-traffic, or ecologically sensitive zones. Now, what's the client base and the market potential? This system is not just for farmers. Its potential clients also include ranches seeking pasture resilience and improved forage, golf courses needing turf that withstands traffic and reduces chemical use as well as water, residential clients looking for eco-conscious lawn care, and organic farms interested in replacing synthetic inputs with biologicals. For residential applications, foliar and topsoil applications can be applied in as little as 1 to 2 hours, offering a scalable service. For larger operations, the slurry injection via keyline plow can cover thousands of acres in a season. For specialty landscapes or targeted remediation, the VOT injector system provides a slower but more targeted delivery method. So a pathway for revenue is carbon credits. Biochar is not just a soil amendment. It's a form of carbon sequestration. Each ton of biochar can sequester roughly 1 to 1.2 tons of CO2 equivalent, and with carbon credits currently trading between $42 and $60 per ton in the United States and Europe, landowners and service providers can monetize this practice. For instance, a 1,000-acre project applying 1 pound of biochar per linear foot using a 3-shank plow at a 2-foot spacing could sequester between 5,800 and 7,200 tons of CO2, potentially generating over $250,000 in carbon credit revenue alone. Smaller residential applications could sequester proportionally less, but still offer a green value add. In conclusion, this biologically integrated dual delivery system represents a scalable, science-backed innovation in sustainable agriculture and land care. With potential benefits across nutrient cycling, pest resistance, soil health, and revenue generation through carbon credits, it bridges ecological stewardship with economic viability. While still theoretical, the principles behind it are rooted in well-established microbiology, mycology, and soil science. Further research and trials could validate its use, paving the way for a new era in regenerative land management. For the curious grower, landscaper, or eco-entrepreneur, this system represents not just a method, but a movement towards living soil and living profit. And that was the article that I co-wrote, and it's still working on. It's the framework of the article named Brewing Biology, a Novel System for Biochar, Compost Tea, and Microbial Inoculation of Plains and Soils. The framework came from a long discussion with ChatGPT's 4.0 model. And I'm going to get into that right now. So I decided to take a walk one day. And this idea is brewing in the back of my head. And me and ChatGPT covered a lot of ground on a 1-hour walk. And if you've got a phone, if you've got ChatGPT, the app on your phone, you can talk to it. And it will talk back to you. So you don't have to look at a screen. That way you can take a walk and not get hit by a car, run over by a bus, or get flattened by a train. Because it's hands-free. You can just talk to it. If you didn't know that, you should try it. It's kind of interesting because this is what we came up with. So I'm on this hour-long walk. And I decide to pick up ChatGPT and go, you know what? What happens if I start asking questions about this particular situation to ChatGPT? What could potentially happen? So I decided to find out, get ChatGPT. I got my phone charged up. I hit the little button where it says, hey, do you want to talk to ChatGPT or do you want to just write stuff? So I hit the button to talk, stow the thing in my pocket, my phone in the pocket, put in my earbuds, and I start saying stuff like, hey, ChatGPT, how you doing? So I actually have the entire session here in my ChatGPT chat, and I started with this. I need to talk to you about a market analysis question. then ChatGPT answers and says, yeah, what up? And I'm like, basically, I need to find out if the market that is soil science, where I help people analyze their soil from a light microscopy standpoint to see what kinds of critters are in their soil, is that a real business? Now, I'm going to stop right there and go and answer your query. You never said anything about light microscopy. This is the way the discussion went. This is the very start of this chat with GPT, right? So this thing, like I said, I'm on this walk for a full hour, and I'm like, man, this is getting kind of weird. This is kind of cool. So I'm going to scroll down here to about midway in the point and read. I'm just going to read one of the questions that I asked and I have not prepared this. Okay, I'm just going to look. I've scrolled down to halfway through, and somewhere I ask, as a United States citizen, am I able to get the full demographics of the country on a state-by-state basis in a format that would plug into QGIS? And you're going, what the hell are you talking about now? This was part of the market analysis of the system that I described. How would I find customers? What kind of customer would want this, right? GIS, or Geographic Information Systems, is a mapping system that can take in large amounts of data and display it visually. What would I be displaying? I'd be displaying voter habits by zip code in every county that I would be able to reach with a system like what I'm describing. Like, who wants lawn care? Well, probably all the people that wanted, things like ChemLawn, or I think it's called Green Turf now or something like that, but they use pretty harsh chemistries. Okay, well, what's the demographic of the people that would rather pay somebody to not use that, but still have really good water infiltration, non-compacted soils, a really nice lawn? Well, it's probably going to be people that vote in a liberal vein, and that's just the truth. It doesn't mean that there's not going to be conservatives out there who don't understand regenerative agriculture. I almost guarantee you that the liberal side knows just as little, except that I'm going to be saying things like carbon credits. I'm going to be saying things like carbon sequestration. They know those words, but I need to have targeted mailing as to where I would send advertisements. So I would pick zip codes that the voting block in that zip code is largely on the blue side. And I would also be using the census data to say and the census data is available to every United States citizen. That's what and I've actually known that for a while. This was actually a test on ChatGPT to figure out if it knew, and it does. The answer was yes, a U.S. citizen can access demographic data on a state-by-state basis, right? So it knows that I can pull down U.S. Census Bureau data. So then I can find out things like, how much does a household make? I know this is awful, but this is how you're being targeted. If you don't, this is not my idea. It is not an original idea for using U.S. Census data, but this is the way you're being targeted. The way your zip code votes, because they don't know, you can't granularize down to addresses. That's a different mechanism. That kind of data is a different way to get. You can get it, but they're not going to let just anybody have it. The best you can do, the most granular you can get, is on a zip code basis. Hey, that's fine. If I got more than 51% that voted either red or blue, depending on what I'm selling, that's where I want to send my mailers. Or that's where I want to go knock on the door. Whatever. But this is the way that I was using ChatGPT, and we get all the way down here to where I'm like, let's see. Oh, let's see. Let me get down to here. Like, another question that I asked ChatGPT was, with the biochar compost tea slurry injection idea, what am I missing? What is, if any, are there any other things that I'm not seeing as a potential product or a service? The answer is, you might consider offering soil testing and customized amendment plans, integrating other organic inputs like mycorrhizal fungi, or offering ongoing maintenance services, additionally exploring partnerships with landscaping companies, yada, 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 yada. So this entire discussion was not only about the science behind the idea that I've already had, the use of mycorrhizal fungi, glomalin, which we'll get into here in a minute, but also market analysis. How would I be able to perform market analysis? How would I be able to contact people that would be my target demographic? All these things. How to use QGIS. I even knew about QGIS. I had forgotten its name. My question was, I can't afford ArcGIS. It's too expensive. And I can't remember the name of the free version. Do you know what that is? And the answer is, yeah, you're talking about QGIS. ChatGPT was spot on. It was absolutely correct. I have QGIS on my laptop right now. I've had it there for months because I used to be a GIS guy, right? So for the people that are saying that this is not a useful tool, they're missing the boat. It depends on how you use the tool. And I'll go back to the hammer analogy. You can build a house, you can build a chicken coop, or you can hit somebody in the head with a hammer. Two of those are okay. One of them is not. Can you guess which one? So let's get into the list that I've got here that kind of takes us through the particulars of this idea, right? So this is more about the cohesion or the synergy that you get using things like compost tea, biochar, application styles, like is it foliar? Is it subsoil? Is it just on top of the soil? There's all of this is in here. So the foliar spray with the compost tea and the biochar. At that point, what we really got to do is we got to look at biochar again. I've got an entire episode on biochar, right? But there's no reason that I can't go through it a little bit here just to understand what we're dealing with. And this is the tie-in with Bitcoin. So biochar is just charcoal. It's a very, very lightweight charcoal that is anywhere between 80 to 85 and sometimes up to 90% pure carbon. There's no aromatic rings that could be used as fuel. It all got burned out. Like if you go buy charcoal at the store for your grill, that is not agrichar. That is not biochar. That is charcoal for your grill. It is different. Why? It's heavy. Well, why is it heavier than biochar? Because it's got a lot of still active burnable materials in it other than the carbon, like hydrocarbons, like ring hydrocarbons. There's all kinds of stuff that can be burnt out of what you're burning. And that's why you use charcoal. It lasts a long time. If you were to put biochar or agrichar on your grill, sure, it'll burn and it will be gone inside of 2 minutes. You're not even going to be able to cook a burger with it, even if you put a huge slug. And while it's burning, if you think you're going to get ahead of it, it burns so hot, you'll just burn your meat to a crisp. So don't do that. Just go use royal oak or something like that. So in the process of making biochar is you need a feedstock like dried bamboo, dried wood, wood chips. Depending on the system that you would choose to make your biochar dictates what kind of material you're going to be dealing with. So let's just say that it's like, I don't know, dried, chipped tree mass from a city park service, right? So I feed what's called a retort with this biochar, and I start the process by basically closing it up in a chamber. There's different ways to do this, but in a closed system, like a batch closed system, you fill up the retort, which is the chamber that all the action is going to happen in, and you close it up, and then you heat it from the bottom until it gets so hot it starts to boil off the hydrocarbons that are present in the wood. And then the heat gets so high that the wood material itself starts to crack like oil in a refinery, and it starts to volatilize, and it starts to get into the gas stream itself. Then that gas is mostly hydrogen, carbon monoxide, and a little bit of methane. And all three of those are highly flammable. So I can take that gas off, and now instead of me heating with an external source, the gas produced by the reaction itself is heating to keep the reaction going, but I don't need all of that gas. It's called syngas or synthetic gas, and I'm not sure why they call it it's called synthesis gas, and I still don't understand why they call it synthesis, because nothing's being synthesized. It's actually being decomposed, but I'll give it to them. So if I can take some of the other part of that gas production and I run it through an electrical generator, I can generate electricity. And in some cases, I can generate, depending on the size of the biochar system that we're talking about, I can generate into the single digit megawatts of power. A single digit megawatts of power means that I can run Bitcoin miners. And the heat from not only the biochar process, making a biochar clearly causes a lot of heat. The engine for the electric generator clearly, since it's burning the gas, is going to generate heat. And then there's the heat from the Bitcoin miners. So happens, the wood that I need to start to have this whole process needs to be at 14% moisture. So I can use all that heat to dry the wood that will be going into the retort later. So that's a way to collect energy. It's a way to mine Bitcoin. It's a way to produce biochar, which goes into this system. Now, what I've always thought of is what happens if we mix really fine ground biochar, and I mean like really fine, in with the brewing of compost tea. Because biochar itself has one of the reasons it works so well in agriculture is that it does a couple of things. It's a battery for nutrients. It's a battery for water. It does it's a pH buffer, but it's also a nutrient buffer as well as a water buffer because it has this ability to adsorb certain things. ADSORB. A sponge you use at your sink is absorbing. AB is in boy. Adsorb is more chemical in nature. Things cling onto the chemistry or through chemical interactions rather than just pores in a sponge. That's AD or adsorb. AD is in dog, right? There's two different ways to cling on. The one we're talking about is adsorb, AD. So it chemically holds water. It chemically holds all manner of nutrients and micronutrients like calcium, magnesium, copper, iron, plus nitrogen, phosphorus, all the macros, all the micros that any plant, they all happen to be positively charged. And water itself has at least one side of it, a positive charge on it. That positive charge gets attracted to the surface area of the biochar, of the carbon, and it clings to it. And the structure of biochar is so porous that like a gram of biochar has the same surface area as an NBA tournament basketball court. 1 gram basketball court. Just think about that. So one of the other things that adsorbs to the surface of carbon is microbiology. They love it. Bacteria and fungus love to live inside the pores of biochar. And it does. If you look at a micrograph of biochar, there's a lot of holes in it, a lot of niches, a lot of places for this stuff to live. And that's what it does. Think of it like an apartment building. If I throw it into compost tea, which I'm brewing, it's like throwing an apartment building to a massive amount of people that are homeless. What do you think is going to happen? They're going to take up residence. They don't want to be in the rain. They want to be protected. They don't want to be freezing outside or baking to death when it's blisteringly hot. They want to be inside. They want to be protected. And bacteria and fungus and amoeba and nematodes and all the rest of the little critters in the soil, they're no different. They're going to want to live in that stuff. And once they take up residence in that stuff, they are protected from predators. So they are able to have little babies, and they do so all the time, which means these little particles that are charged with life are constantly emitting new life. Now, this is the part where I need to talk just a little bit about compost tea. Compost tea is simply just taking high quality compost and putting it like in like a mesh bag and putting it into a bucket of water and then putting a fish pump in that water and aerating the living shit out of it, because you need air, because the life that's in that compost is aerobic. It needs air to be able to metabolize stuff, right? So if you don't give it air, it's going to get sour. It's going to be nasty. You don't want it. So, but it's that easy. You just leave it there for 24 hours. You make sure the air is always flowing through like some kind of like bubbler stone or something like that. And that's the cheapest entry level way to get into compost tea. Or you could do the shit that this woman named Elaine Ingham does. Now, she's one of the guys that discovered, or rather started being a proponent of something she calls the soil food web. She is a huge proponent of compost tea. And her and a partner of hers built a compost tea brewer that's based on one of those giant, everybody's seen them. I'm going to try to describe it. You'll see them full of water in the back of somebody's Toyota pickup truck, and they're going out and washing cars. It's basically a square cube. They're generally gray in color, kind of translucent. You can see the level of the water in it. And there's an aluminum frame around them. And that's what's called an industrial tote. Ketchup is shipped to bottling plants in this kind of thing. You know, like soy sauce is shipped to bottling plants in this kind of thing, because a lot of these things are food grade because they're used in the food industry a lot, but they hold like, I don't know, 550 gallons or something like that. These are really big things. And they built and installed a particular kind of bubbler system into this thing, and it is mad wild the amount of, it's like an air compressor. It's not a bubbler with a little, on a little fish tank. No, this thing screams. When they start this thing up, it screams. It's really loud, which kind of sucks for the brewing process, but hey, there it is. And it makes deadly sure that every cubic centimeter of water is at full capacity with dissolved oxygen. That is its job. So when you put the bag of compost tea in that son bitch, man, that is like the perfect brewing environment. Now, if I add a whole bunch, and I mean like pounds and pounds and pounds of biochar to that, and I'm brewing all of this together, by the time the brewing cycle is done, anywhere between 24 hours and like 2 full days, depending, there's a big, it depends thing out there with this, but by that time, every single cubic centimeter of biochar is going to be fully inoculated with whatever critters I see fit to deposit in that compost tea. Right? So let's talk. Just keep that in your back pocket. So what I've got at the end of this is a whole bunch of compost tea that's been absorbed into a whole bunch of biochar. And I've got a slurry that is just teeming with life, waiting to be deposited. So what do I do with it? Well, we talked about foliar spray, which is like you spray the leaves of the plants and all that, the top ground stuff of plants, whether the bushes, trees, I don't know, annuals, whatever. And it goes into the ground. But before we talk about foliar spray, what are endophytes? Because this is the key. So I've talked about arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi, or AMF, right? So it is a fungus, and it lives, generally speaking, in the soil, but it also lives inside of plant roots. But not only that, it lives a lot farther up inside the tree or plant or bush than people think about. People generally only associate it with root zone situations, but that's not entirely true. It gets into the rest of the woody tissue as well. How far up? I'm not quite sure, but I know it goes past the root zone. That is an endophyte. What does it do? Well, the fungus goes out and mines a whole much more nutrients, finds water. It does all kinds of things that the plant roots itself, whether tree or grass, are just not as efficient. Yes, those plant roots and tree roots can do it, and they do, but you get a lot more coverage, a lot more surface area, and fungus are purpose-built to go mine minerals. They are miners. They produce organic acids that dissolve all manner of rock, and they pull stuff out of magnesium rocks. They pull stuff that all the plants need. And they say, okay, plant, I've got the phosphorus. I produce this organic acid, and it dissolved this phosphate rock. I've got phosphorus in a format you can use, and I want to give it to you, but you got to give me some sugar and some protein. That's the plant's currency. Actually, that's the fungal currency as well, because the fungus needs the sugar and the protein to eat, because it cannot actually produce its own food. So it depends on the tree or plant to do the photosynthesis and make sugars and proteins so that it can trade that with the fungus for any manner of like half of the frickin' periodic table of the elements. Just figure it that way. But it's an endophyte. It lives inside. Endo means inside. It's an endophytic organism. So it literally crawls in between the cells in the roots and grows God only knows how far up. And sometimes it will actually grow into the cell itself, or rather it'll form a pocket inside the cell, but it doesn't actually break the cell wall or the cell membrane. But that pocket, brothers and sisters, is there's a gap between the cell wall and the end of the mycorrhizal fungi, and that's where they set up their market stalls. There's a market stall that trades sugar for phosphorus. There's a different market stall that trades sugar for magnesium. There's 100, I don't know, let's say 25. There's 25 different market stalls, and they're all using sugar as currency, and the fungus is basically just like saying, hey, man, you can have all you want as long as you got sugar to pay for it, right? But they're not the only endophytic creatures around. There's a couple of different fungi that actually operate that way, that do all kinds of other cool stuff for the plant. But even beyond that, there's other endophytes that are not fungal based. They're bacterially based, and they do cool shit too. Like they have, like there's one that there's a bacteria that if it grows inside the leaves and insect comes and eats the leaves, that insect dies. And it's completely natural, has nothing to do with bioengineering or genetic sequencing or anything like that. Shit's been around since long before we were furry apes, still figuring out whether or not we wanted to drop out of the trees. Right? So that part I don't worry about. The part that I think about a lot is, how do I ensure that these plants have all these endophytes? How do I get them into the plant? And that's where the foliar spray comes in. Right? And the soil injection, but we're going to start with the foliar spray. So it turns out that there's this stuff that arbuscular mycorrhizae fungi create that's called glomalin. It's what's called a glycoprotein. It's a sugar molecule and a small protein molecule basically combined together. And it acts like glue. And soils that are rich in arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi are more glued together. Their little soil particles have this glue between them, and they are so much less susceptible to water and wind erosion than soils that do not have a good population of arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi. Glue. I need a glue. What do I need a glue for? I need a glue to make sure that if I shove some bacteria that is going to be good for the plant onto its leaf, that the bacteria can stay there long enough to possibly be able to gain entry into the leaf. If I just throw a bunch of powder that has this particular bacteria in it, it might just all wash off in the next rain, and I get nothing out of it. And the bacteria may or may not be able to really navigate all the way from the root zone back up into the leaves. So one of the things that we can do is we can change the nature of how we apply it and use a slurry, liquid-based inoculant, both fungal inoculant and bacterial inoculant, right? So, like for instance, I've already talked to you about arbuscular mycorrhizae. That's a fungal endophyte. Then there's something called trichoderma, which is another kind of fungus, but it's completely different than mycorrhiza. But it offers something different. There's Bavaria, which is a pest deterrent fungus, right? The fungus is a little bit easier to get in, but the bacteria is not. So what I need is I need a liquid that contains a particle that is completely impregnated, not just on the surface, but inside the particle itself, the very thing that I wish to deliver. So I want to actually use the biochar that's been charged with life as the delivery system for that life to the plant. But again, if I just throw it on there as a liquid and then it rains, or even even in if it's keep it on there like let's say 12 hours and then it rains, may not be enough time. 24 hours and then it rains, still may not be enough time. But if I can glue the particles that bear the life, the biochar that is charged with life, if I can glue that to the surface of the leaf and maybe have it hang around a lot longer than what it normally would, well, now I've got a hell of a lot of chance to be able to get all the critters that I want inside the plant to actually go inside the plant, because it's clinging, it's glued. It's not just clinging, it's actually physically glued to the plant surface, right? So that's the role of glomalin here. It's critical to be able to have this stuff so that the stuff that I want in the plant actually sticks to the plant. But the same thing is actually true with any of the beneficial bacteria that I might add. And that the fungus itself is a little bit easier to get into the plant from the leaf and stem surface. Bacteria, not so much. So again, the glue comes into play. And that's sort of where we go back into thinking about the way that we brew this particular solution. Because normally, hey, you put the bag of compost in the compost tea reactor, and then you turn on the air compressor, and hey, everything's freaking good. And you just leave it alone for 24 to 48 hours, and you come back, and then you get it onto your plants or into the soil as fast as you can, so that it doesn't, everything doesn't die. Because the minute you turn off that air compressor, everything's going to start dying. So you got to get it applied really, really quick. The problem is that if I just add all these different critters all at the exact same time into the brewing cycle, it's not going to work. You're going to get competition. Specifically, you're going to get bacteria out competing the fungus. I need the fungus. I need the arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi to produce the glomalin, because that's the glue. So I need to make sure that shit is set up first. So I make sure that I've got a fungally dominated compost tea before I even think about adding anything else. And then at the end of the brewing cycle, I can be adding any one of the more competitive critters to my compost tea, because by the time that they grow up, I will be ready to actually do the deed of applying it. And then I don't have to worry about it ever again. How does this work? Well, this is where a lot of science is going to have to come in, and actual experimentation. But you can control, like, if, for instance, like one of these critters that I'm looking at can crash the pH of the brew cycle. Well, if I crash it too much, it's going to kill the fungus that's already in there. If I raise the pH, if I put in another critter that raises the pH too much, my mycorrhizal fungi just goes bye-bye. I got to control the pH. So that's got to be monitored. And all of this can be automated, by the way. The other thing that needs to be monitored is how much food am I putting, raw food like humic acid or fish slurry or molasses is another one that's used for the brewing of compost tea. How much goes in? When does it go in? What's the temperature? And then, how much of the bacteria solution do I put in? Like, I've got to brew this stuff up too separately, and I've got to deliver it, and most likely it's going to be delivered by a liquid. How much? We kind of need a lab to figure out, well, in a milliliter, you're going to have this many colony-forming units of this particular bacteria. I could use a dosing pump. If I know how many bacteria or colony-forming units are in 1 milliliter, then I can correctly dose this thing. And again, even the dosing pumps and the pH. Like if I've gotten too high in pH, I can add some acid. That's a dosing pump. If I want to start adding 3 different kinds of bacteria, but the first one one of them has to go first and the other one has to go last, I can use dosing pumps. And all of it can be monitored. The only thing that really can't be monitored is the population of all the critters, and that's where light microscopy came in. And if you remember, that's where I began the entire conversation with ChatGPT. So now I've got this automated brewing system. I've got this cool-ass foliar spray that makes sure that it glues the very thing that I'm hoping to get into the plant to every leaf surface. I'm going to have a good shot at getting all these plants inoculated with this stuff. And once they're inoculated, pretty much never going to have to do it again. And I might want to do it again, but I probably don't have to. What's left? Getting this stuff into the soil. And this is actually where I first started thinking about this entire system. But it was only about biochar. Specifically, it was really only about agricultural charcoal. Because like I said, it's a magnet for all kinds of things. Life in the soil wants to live there, so that's good. It buffers nutrients, so it will collect up excess nutrient and hold on to it until later when the plant needs it, so you don't have all this stuff wash off. But mostly, it's its water retaining capability. This charcoal will hold anywhere, and the literature is all over the place, right? I've heard anywhere from 4 times its weight in water all the way up to 10 times its weight in water. I'm just going to use 7. So if I've got a pound of biochar, it will chemically hold on to 7 pounds of water. That means I can lay it out in the sun, and it will take a hell of a lot longer to evaporate the water because it's chemically bound and not structurally bound. Like if I leave a wet sponge on a table and I put a pile of wet biochar right next to it, guess which one dries to a crisp? Yeah, the sponge. Guess which one is still wet in the center for days? The biochar, because it's chemically bound. It's not mechanically bound like it is in a sponge. All right, so now I can make anything drought tolerant, but I need to get it into the soil. Well, what if I don't want to plow soil because that has problems all of its own. So how would I be able to get this injected into the soil? And that's where there's these two systems comes from. One is the yeoman's keyline plow. And if you look at a yeoman's keyline plow, it's essentially for farm work or ranch work. It sits on the back of a tractor that's got a lot of horsepower. It has a shank that goes straight down, and then it's got a shovel tip that comes out anywhere between 80 to 90 degrees where it's pointing in the direction of travel, right? So when you lower this, when you start your tractor and you're moving forward and you lower the yeoman's keyline plow into the soil, it can go anywhere depending on what depth you want, right? Some people do 6 inches, and then they do 12, and then they do 18. I've seen shanks go down 24 inches, right? I mean, some of these can go down 2 foot. I'll bet you somebody's been able to go down 3 foot, right? But what it does is the shank itself is about as wide as your wrist. It doesn't disturb the soil on top of the soil that much, but what it does do is it explodes the soil below the surface. So it decompacts everything, it breaks everything up, and it's great for a while. And what happens is you get way better water infiltration because you've got not only these physical trenches in the top of the soil that water falls into, but you've broken up the subsurface and the subsoil anywhere down, from 6 inches all the way down to 24 inches. So the water falls into the ground. Hey, this is great, except one small problem. If you're on a pasture and there's not a whole lot of life in the soil to begin with, just because you do this is not going to place life into the soil. And therefore, if you got traffic area, actually, and even eventually, this shit's probably going to recompact on you and you're going to have to do this step a couple of times. But if you lay down a shit ton of life-filled biochar as a slurry in the trench, at the same time you're making the trench, which means you got a pipe on the back of the shank so that the pipe is protected from the forward motion cutting through the soil, you can just sit there and fill the trench right after it's been made with as much biochar as you want. You would need a slurry pump, and you clearly need a reservoir. You need the biochar compost tea mix. You need all that, but you can get it from anywhere between 6 inches in the soil to 12 to 18 to 24 inches in the soil minimum. And that carbon stays there forever. Now, some people say, well, 10,000 years. As other people say, well, 1,000 years. Dude, really? Are we really going to argue? No, it's forever. As far as you and I are concerned, I can put a pound of carbon per linear foot into this soil, and it will never leave the soil. And then when the rain and the nutrients start falling in and infiltrating into that soil, the water and the nutrients are going to be grabbed onto by all that carbon that's in the soil. And secondly, it's going to hold on to all that carbon and water that's in the soil, and it's going to act as a buffering system. But here's the best part. That land will never compact again, especially if you go 3 depths. If you lay down carbon at 6 inches, and then you come back later in the season, or even next season, and you do 12, and you offset where the furrows were, and then you come back like the next season and you do 18, you've got 3 different depths where you've injected massive amounts, I mean sheer metric tonnage of carbon into the soil. I guarantee you that soil will never compact again. It can't. It just can't. And if it's sandy based and you never had a compaction problem before, but you've got nutrient poor soils, well, now you've got a battery for water and nutrient in sandy based soils. It's a win-win no matter what kind of soil you got, unless you've already got a shit ton of organic, stuff in your soil, in which case you've probably already done something like this. So now there's 2 delivery mechanisms, right? There's this trenching system that is widely applied. P.A. Yeomans designed the yeoman's plow back in the 30s or 40s or something like that. It's a well-known piece of farm equipment. Now, I'm not coming up with anything new here. It's just using it to inject a whole bunch of carbon into the soil. But let's say you're not on a farm. And in that article I was telling you, with the calculations that I've run, it's not outside the realm of possibility as a service provider. If I can prove that I sequestered that much carbon on 1,000 acres, then yes, it's possible to get $250,000 cold hard cash by me selling carbon credits that would be delivered to me because I proved that I am able to sequester that much carbon. That's the way that shit works. And we can scream and get mad all day long about carbon credits, but if these idiots are going to do this, if they're going to give me money for putting carbon in the ground, I'm going to take their money for putting carbon in the ground. Besides, I would do it anyway, even without the carbon credits, because of what it does for the soil. What charcoal does for the soil is freaking amazing, right? So even without the carbon, but I'm not going to leave money on the table. I'm not that dumb. I mean, I've got some neural problems every once in a while when I don't have enough coffee or if I had too much beer. But other than that, I'm not dumb. I'm not leaving it on the table, and that's why I talk about carbon credits. I'm not running around thinking that we're all going to die because carbon dioxide. No, I'm running around trying to figure out, really, you're going to give me money if I can prove that I put the stuff in the ground and the farmer pays me to put it in the ground, and you're going to pay me? I get money twice? Are you shitting me? See where I'm going with this? I mean, this ain't rocket science either, man. Everything that I'm describing is completely possible for today, like right now. But what if you don't have a farm? What if you don't have a ranch? What if you don't have 1,000 acres? What if you just want your lawn to look better? Well, that's where that VOT geo-injector system comes in, and VOT is spelled V-O-G-T. It's a brand name, and you can look it up. It's either Dutch or German. I can't remember which, but they have machines that are purpose-built to sort of do the exact same thing a keyline plow does, only differently. So let's kind of line you out on what the VOT injector system is. It comes in 2 pieces. Or at least the geo injector system. They have all kinds of machines, but this one is the one that I'm thinking is pretty good for this system. It comes with a air compressor in a housing on wheels along with a hopper. That's one part of the story. The other part of the story is the delivery system. It looks like a jackhammer. If you've ever seen a jackhammer, this thing looks a lot like a jackhammer. It's essentially a pneumatic jackhammer, except that instead of breaking up concrete, unless you're in West Texas where clay soils can be exactly like concrete, you're breaking up soil. And the way it works is just think of somebody putting a jackhammer on your lawn. And then they turn on the air compressor and they hit a button and it essentially uses the air compressor to pneumatically drive tick 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 tick, tick this spike into the ground, and you get it down whatever depth you want, 18 inches. I think they said anywhere between 30 and 50 centimeters, and I think that's, I don't know, anywhere between 1 and 2.5 feet, somewhere like that. I can't remember, maybe 3 feet. These things can go pretty deep, but that spike that's now buried in the ground is hollow. Then you hit another button, and a huge slug of compressed air comes out, and it basically fractures the soil underneath the soil. So it's not like plowing the top, it's like plowing the soil from beneath. Then you press a third button, and the pneumatic action of the air compressor throws whatever material you want. However, like people go, well, what do you want to put down there? Stuff so that the soil doesn't recompact. Other people put fertilizers in there. Some people put both. Some people put these things that are specifically designed to make sure that the soil doesn't recompact. That's it. Except it's all dry material. I haven't seen a Vought that can actually use wet material. So we can if we could get Vought to possibly modify it, or maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe I haven't studied it enough to figure out that, oh yeah, they are using liquid in it. But this is the thing, because this system I can push around on my own, right? I mean, one guy, you know, I mean, I'm not going to push it I'm going to put it on a truck to get it to wherever it is that I need, but it's not that heavy. It's not like this mondo amount of machinery that's going to crush sprinkler heads. So therefore, that's what I would use for residential areas, and just, you know, mark off where I want to put the holes, make sure, you know, and I would be making sure where's the sprinkler system so that I don't crack pipes. And yes, some trial and error is going to, you know, would be involved in that. But then I'd be able to deliver at whatever depth that I want, to a point, this same bioslurry. And I would still be able to collect carbon credits if I had 100 customers that saw the benefits of having A, their lawns decompacted, B, a long-term nutrient and water buffer system put directly underneath the soil where the roots need it at different depths. They're going to start seeing the fact that they don't have to use as much water anymore. And that means a lot out in West Texas. And if you're somebody who hates lawns, I get it. I understand. If you're somebody who hates golf courses, I also get it. Even I'm like going, that's a lot of water. But I'm sorry, your hatred of golf courses is not going to make the golf course go away. That golf course is still going to be there. And the only thing that we can do is figure out ways that they consume less water. It just so happens that I like this idea because I can get the idiots from the UN to cut me carbon credits that I can sell to some Wall Street trader. Even though I would have wanted to do it anyway, because I would charge this whole thing as a service. So that's actually the last part of this article. Honestly, is what clients do you need, and what equipment would have to be there to service particular clients' needs. A rancher with pasture is probably not going to give a shit that as long as I follow the contour lines on his pasture, when I'm using a key line plow to deliver this carbon, he's not going to care about the look. The farmer, okay, well, we'll have to time that. When are they planting? Probably have to do this whole thing in the winter. You know, where do they want to put their furrows if that's what they're doing, if they're putting furrows? There's many ways to skin that cat. But a residential customer is completely different than both of those. I can't use a key line plow there. I will rip up their sprinkler system. Plus, I'm not going to put a John Deere tractor hauling a key line plow on somebody's lawn that is like a postage stamp. That's just stupid. So you got to come up with something else. And that's where the Vought geo-injector system comes up. So between coming up with a business case, a market analysis, me going back and forth with ChatGPT about the particulars of the science of whether this is sound, all the way to using QGIS to figure out who might want to buy this service first. I mean, it was an hour-long walk, guys. Now, yes, the idea for the glomalin as well as different kinds of bacteria and endophytic stuff and arbuscular mycorrhizae and plant biology and biochar and compost tea, that's already in my head. I'm not really depending on ChatGPT for it. If I was, I'd probably be in a hell of a lot more world of hurt using ChatGPT to construct something like this than I am. But I feel fairly confident after going back through the chat log, the article that's being written about it, that we're pretty much spot on. And it basically was just me talking to ChatGPT, having a conversation, asking questions. I would say stuff like, okay, before we get into this next section, I need you to familiarize yourself with this stuff called biochar. Please reach out to the web and go research. I would wait about 30 seconds and it would come back with a description of what biochar was. And I'm like, hey, you're pretty close enough for us to continue. So now that ChatGPT had armed itself with the information for biochar, we could start going into other parts. In fact, it was ChatGPT that reminded me of endophytic, the word endophyte or endophytic, right? I needed that word. And I was struggling. I'm like going, like there's a word. And I started describing the fact that if you have Bermuda or endophyte infected Bermuda grass and you're grazing cows on it, if your cow doesn't die, the meat is going to stink. I'm not going to get into why. That's outside the scope of this conversation. But I'm like, so I describe it. I'm like, there's this thing that cows get. If they eat this stuff, their meat stinks or they die, and sometimes they have other digestive problems. I think it's like phytogenetics, and I'm like just stumbling. I'm stumbling. And she comes back and she goes, well, phyto this and phyto that. And I go, no, it's not phyto. It's like that. And I had to describe it again in a different set of terms. After 3 rounds of that, she goes, are you talking about endophytes? And I'm like, that's the word. That's the word. ChatGPT absolutely bailed my ass out. And again, I'm on a walk. I'm literally already walking. I might as well have this conversation. Yeah, and I guess, people around me might think I'm a little crazy, but most people are used to people talking on their phones anyway through their earbuds, so I'm pretty safe nowadays, but I probably wouldn't be able to get away with this inside of a gym, like on a treadmill or something like that, or lifting weights. I mean, could you imagine, like, doing squats going, all right, now, yeah, ChatGPT, I need you to go look for like a recipe for tangy chicken. Yeah, it's probably not going to work. So a long walk, an idea in your mind, and ChatGPT on your phone, give it a shot, because you never freaking know what you might come up with. You might, in fact, come up with an hour and 2-minute, 43-second episode of Bitcoin and just like I did, and I'll see you on the other side. This has been Bitcoin and I'm your host, David Bennett. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and hope to see you again real soon. Have a great day.